Hi, I'm Jay Schultz with Pool Technicians. This is going to be the first of many seminars or tutorials we're going to do on different things in pool repair. This first one's going to be doing a pump seal on an Aqua Flo pump. Let's start with the tools we're going to need for this. I think this is 1/8 inch. This is an Allen wrench. This will fit the shaft in here. 1-inch PVC coupling or something similar. We use this to drive the new seal in. A chisel or scraper, something to scrape with. File comes in handy. This is an impeller wrench. If you had to, you could use a screwdriver or something flat to spin the impeller off. Hammer comes in handy. 7/8 end wrench or adjustable wrench, pair of pliers works. Something to drive the old seal out with. This is just a piece of 1/2 inch galvanized pipe. You can use punches, sockets, a lot of things. A 1/2 inch, a 9/16 end wrench, or these are the little stubby speed wrenches. Wire brush, that comes in handy. First thing we're going to do, I like to loosen up the motor bolts first, just because when you are replacing the pump seal, the pipes are going to be there. The pump's going to be a lot more stable than this, but sometimes these bolts are seized up. With this stuff plumbed in here, if they're hard to turn or get off, it's just a lot easier to do when this is all attached together. So all I do is just loosen them up a little bit. They're loosened. We're going to go ahead and pull off the 1/2 inch ones. This is a pump coming in. You can see that it has been leaking. I don't know how the seal looks on it, but these little speed wrenches are great. If you have your electrical connected, as long as your connection is long enough to pull the motor back to get it loose, that's going to be fine. You won't have to disconnect any of the electrical. If you're not going to be able to move the motor, you won't. But typically we do these. We don't disconnect the electrical, nor do we disconnect any plumbing. Everything is all connected up while we're there. Okay, we get our 4 bolts out. This is going to separate the adapter bracket from the volute. This I just pushed on it. Sometimes this is normally something we take and kick it with our foot right here, or maybe right here, just to be able to break it loose. This one was not bad at all. Now again, because this pump is not plumbed in, this is going to shift around on me, but that's not a problem. We're not working with this right now anyway. Okay, so we've got our bracket, our shaft extension, the seal's inside of here behind the impeller. What I'm going to do is take a 7/8 inch end wrench. This is going to lock the shaft. Most all of them are this size. If not, a small pair of 6-inch adjustable channel locks will work. We take the impeller wrench, we unscrew the impeller. Here you'll see one side of the pump seal. Here's the other side of the pump seal. I just normally take the hammer, just give a little tap. Okay, now we've got our adapter bracket, our seal completely exposed. Now we just have the motor left with a shaft extension on it. They make special pullers to get these off if they're stuck. Sometimes they're in so bad you can't even get the set screws loose. This one here isn't bad. This is still adjustable. We'll pull this off. I'm going to take the pump seal out. This is our adapter bracket. We just want to drive it out of the backside. Set it down, a piece of pipe, chisel, most anything. Just work it out. As you can see, our seal, it came out. Don't know if you can see it or not. These little ears, they just have a tendency to get pulled in a little bit. We want to take this, clean it, pull these ears out. Same thing on the back. I don't know if you're aware of it, you can see it, but pulling against the motor, the aluminum end bell motors will push against these here, and what will happen is it'll bend these ears back on this side too. So we just want to take and straighten this thing out. This is where you don't have to be afraid. Just take a hammer. Mostly these ears that I'm hitting back out on here, you can see on the back side already, see the difference that it's made. Even if you go a little bit too far, it doesn't matter. When you bolt it up to the motor, it's going to pull right back in flat. So we'll go ahead. You don't need it quite as much, but we want to make sure that these little corners are not bent in. See the difference there? Okay, Now we're ready to install the new pump seal. Aqua Flo takes a PS1000. We like US seals better. Some of the makes have brass housings around the ceramic. These here have always been good to us. We've used them a lot of years. Nice stainless steel housing around it. Another product I forgot to mention. This is, we call this plasto joint stick. Some people use a silicone caulking. You really don't have to use anything, but you just want to make sure that this area inside of here is clean. Sometimes if you have to, you can just take a screwdriver, or we have a chisel here. We can just clean out the inside of it. I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning on the bracket where the gasket goes. Wire brushes work good. This one has some grooves in it. A chisel, a scraper, many different things. Big thing is to make sure is that these little corners aren't bent in, and that you tap them with a hammer and bring them back out to where everything is going to sit properly. Also, you want to be conscious on the back side. This one here, not aware and if you can see it, there's a buildup. This was on an aluminum end bell motor, and there's a buildup. There's a little groove here, that there's a groove in the motor that meets this, and if I don't get this cleaned out of here, because this isn't the same bracket that I took off this motor, if I don't get this cleaned out, it's not going to seat properly. That's a lot cleaner. If you have to, also, you can take a file across the back of this thing. That'll help tell you if it's flat, if you've got any buildup on it. We'll set that aside. Now we'll come over to the volute. The gasket. This one's come off pretty intact. Sometimes you really have to do a lot of cleaning on them. I just like to take and make sure we get everything good and flat. Last thing I like to do is take a file. This is just a flat standard file, and we'll come through and just, if there's any high spots or anything else, this will take it off. You can see this pump's got a little bit of mileage, or this volute's got some mileage on it. I don't know if you can see that or not, but if you notice right in here, there's some wear. It's not too bad, but this gets further up in an area. What'll happen is it's just eventually going to put a hole right through this volute, and it's going to be squirting water out of it. We want to do a couple of things to it first. We want to take, and I like to make sure, again, I just have a little bit of grease. Just a little bit on the shaft is all we need. You don't need much. You can also, these set screws, if they're stainless steel, you don't need to worry about it. If they're not stainless steel, it's also nice because when these get wet, if they're the zinc type bolts, Allen screws, they will get seized up. And that's all this is for, to make sure that this shaft is going to stay free, which you'll see when we come to adjusting the impeller is something that's important. We have our keyway here. We have the set screws. We put the set screws right on top. We just want to make sure this shaft is spinning freely. This does have a top to it. On all of these, you've got sides with vents around all the way, but the flat side, that's the side that goes on the top. So we're going to center that up, put it across here, start putting in our bolts. And we just want to make sure that this bracket is snugging up against the motor evenly. And how we're going to be able to tell that is by looking at the shaft through the seal itself. If this bracket isn't on the motor square, the shaft isn't going to be in the middle of the pump seal. And also you'll be able to tell because there's going to be a gap on this bracket where it's not sitting up against the motor properly. This one here, you can see we've got no gaps in here, and as far as the seal goes, it should be sitting right in the middle. We're back to the impeller. We have the other part of the ceramic seal inside of the impeller. Just simply take a screwdriver, pry it out. We want to make sure that's clean in there. We can take and put a little bit of lube in there if there is none. The other part of our seal, this is the impeller end of it here. Just want to make sure when you handle this that you don't touch any of this white ceramic area, especially now you get grease and stuff on your fingers. We like to take and put a little bit of silicone grease or ear grease, nose grease, just off yourself, just as long as it's not petroleum grease. Get it ready, put it in, and that should punch in, seat all flat. Okay, now our two pieces of ceramic, we just want to be careful that we don't nick or damage any of this white ceramic here when we put it on the shaft extension. Oh, and one other thing on the shaft extension, we like to use a thread sealant. I've already put it on here, but it's this same Plasto joint stick. This is a water connection thread here. If water seeps through this thread, it's going to leak out and down the shaft. It won't leak out the seal, but it's another way that water can leak out. So we do want to make sure that these threads that thread into the impeller are going to be a watertight thread. Most people don't, and 99% of the time you'll never have a problem, but every now and then there is one. Okay, back we're going to hold the shaft with a 7/8 wrench. You're going to want to be especially careful when you're playing with these bronze impellers that are open. This one isn't sharp, but as these things get worn, they can get very sharp. You may want to use a rag when you tighten this up. This one here I'm not worried about because it's not sharp, but be very careful. These edges can get very sharp and cut you. Let's go ahead and put on our new volute gasket. A lot of different makes of these, some of them thicker, some of them thinner. Plug it into our volute. There's a little shoulder on this thing, these things, that you can get the bolt started, and actually if you don't get it to where it seats all the way before you start the bolts, to where, again, this is harder to do, to where this little shoulder sits over the top, well, what's going to happen is it's not going to seal up, and you'll know it when you fill up the trap because there's going to be a big leak. I like to just get the bolt started and then go to the next bolt. These aren't things that you want to take and get a bolt started and tighten it down and before you go to the next one. And again, we just with these want to make sure that they're stainless steel bolts. And you'll know too if you've gotten that shoulder on properly because the gap is going to start closing up. This one actually here seems like it's pretty tight up on this one corner because it doesn't want to seem to be coming in, but now she's coming around. We don't want to tighten these bolts too tight again, just for a reason being, it's when you over tighten these bolts that go into the volute, this is when you bend the corners of these ears in. All the way around here. I've got a nice tight seal on that. Okay, the next thing to be done is to set the impeller. The impeller and the shaft extension are in here. You can see we've got our set screws here. We're going to put in our Allen wrench. This is the key to this thing. We want this impeller up against this volute as far to the forward as we can get without touching. Right now it's forward all the way so much that it's touching. So what we want to do is we want to back it off a little bit. I just come in with a screwdriver, and you can see with the screwdriver, I'll leave my set screw wrench up here up top. You can see that I can move this shaft back and forth. Okay? What I want to do is I'm going to turn the screwdriver just ever so little. See, just that little bit of movement. Very little. I'm going to go a little bit to where it's free. You can loosen it and also look and see how much it moves forward when you do it. You shouldn't even be able to see it move. If you could get that thing, a 1/100th of an inch would be fantastic, but just a little bit. This is something too, if once you get it all back together and running, you play with it, you'll see the difference it makes if you pull it back 1/8 of an inch, and you'll see how much less pressure and how much less water it pumps. The closer you can get it, the better. Sometimes they might rub just a little bit to where it spins freely but rubs. I've even had these to where if they're making a little bit of noise, they'll stop. But again, the key to setting this thing close as you can get it without it rubbing. Also, while I have them and while we're working on them, sometimes there is a paper gasket in here and they get really old, and we really like to do these on stay-right pumps also that have the old paper gasket, but sometimes these can get a little bit loose. Just a nice little, if they are loose. If they're tight and they're fine, they don't need a thing. The other thing I like to do, Also check and make sure, see how the basket is, see how the trap lid is. This lid, we pull it off here. This O-ring is completely flat. And it's hard also, and it's also cracked. So we're going to want to replace this. Just a matter, working a screwdriver underneath it. We have a new O-ring. You can see the difference. The worn out. One side is round, one side is flat. It's gotten worn. This one, both sides are round. On this here, it's just simply going to fit in the lid. Even if it doesn't fit all the way in here, once you get it back together, it will. The next thing I like to do, the top of these lids take a lot of abuse. Just from scale and the O-rings and everything else. When I do these pumps, I like to take off these T-bolts first. A lot of times these T-bolts need lubricating and greasing also. They just squeak, they're hard to turn, or sometimes you have to take a wire brush and keep turning them back and forth and lube them just to get them off. We have a number of these that these T-bolts will break because they just got seized up and they got turned too many times and got broken because, why? They never got lubricated. If they are dirty, if you got scale, you can take a wire brush, clean these things up. These aren't bad at all. But what I like to do is take care of the surface while I'm here. Again, easier when the pump is plumbed in and nothing moves for you. But if you take a file and we're taking off the high spots. A bit of our grease. Put some on the threads. We don't want to get any on the O-ring. We just want to get some on the threads so that these T-bolts spin nice and easily and they remain that way. Because properly greased up, these things just, these pumps go year after year after year after year after year. It's just absolutely amazing how many of these things we have that are 20, 25, 30, 35 plus years old that are still going. I can't turn it on and test it, but I can see if the seal's leaking or if the volute gasket's leaking. I'm going to put water in here. And if I did good, you won't see any water leaking or dripping anywhere here. Looks like a drop of water, but that's water I think that I got on it when I splashed it. And you won't see any water leaking around the seal. That looks good. And of course, when you turn yours on, if you have any leaking, you'll know it.